What is going on? Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. I'm sitting down with a high-level black belt professional jiu-jitsu athlete, Mr. Emil Fischer. What is going on, brother? Thanks so much for joining the show.
Of course, man. How's it going?
Going great. Hey, so I know that we're going to do a little reaction here to the New York Times article, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to train jiu-jitsu in a safe and effective way. And we're going to talk about why this article might have a little bit of BS in it. But first, before we get to all that good stuff, I want to ask you the question that we start off every conversation with, which is, how has training in jiu-jitsu helped your mental health since you started training?
I don't even really know. I've been doing jiu-jitsu off and on for about 24 years. There have been periods where I didn't train. There have been periods where I've trained. Well, no, right now I've probably trained the most I've ever trained in my life because I run 2 programs, and so I'm literally training every day if I'm available. But honestly, for me, it's the biggest eye-opener was when everything was shut down and I got to kind of see where my head was at, without jiu-jitsu. And it's jiu-jitsu keeps me grounded. There's something cathartic about going out there on the mat, whatever you're doing, be it training, drilling, competing, and just kind of pouring yourself into this physical activity. I don't know how specific it is to jiu-jitsu, but I do think that the stress of having another person trying to submit you forces you to be mindful, and it forces you to take your focus away from other things in life. And in that way, I think that that's how it has helped me. It has helped me kind of focus, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I feel like anything else is just going to be kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it helps you get really in that primal, visceral state. I had PJ Barch on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that it kind of puts you into this primal zone where it's like kill or be killed. And just like we had back in the prehistoric days when we were all apparently spending our days fighting off the saber-toothed tigers and killing woolly mammoths with our bare hands and all that stuff. So it almost like simulates that. It's real, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you this too. I know that you're someone who's turned jiu-jitsu into a career. But how has it helped your life off the mats outside of jiu-jitsu itself? Like, how has it helped your relationships with other people and things like that?
I mean, honestly, having an outlet for aggression and for all the negativity, I think has been helpful. I'm less tempted to punch people in the face than to strangle people because of the fact that I spend my recreational time or my time outside of the office or the factory here, doing that. So I think in that regard, it's been helpful. It's also, it's introduced me to a lot of really cool people. There are experiences and friendships that I've made that, if you had told teenage me when I first started training that would be my reality in my late 30s, I would have laughed at you. I've had so many ridiculous, truly ridiculous opportunities in my life that, I do. I mean, I'm prepping Stipe Miocic for a fight against John Jones. That is a thing that I am doing. That is a reality in my life. So, in that regard, I guess it's been helpful because I wouldn't have had those opportunities without jiu-jitsu.
Dude, that's nuts. What's that like, training with a high-level dude like that?
Big part of it is making sure that the training is applicable for his sport and making sure that the training is applicable for what he's got ahead of him. There are things that I'm not going to bother teaching him, and there's things that I wouldn't really bother training, just because they're not relevant to me or those things are not relevant to him. So it comes down to how can I help you best prepare for this monumental task. Like that's what it comes. That's what it's like. I mean, I've been at the gym where Stipe trained since I was a white belt. Like I started there in 2014, so I've been there for a while. I just took over the program back in March, so it's really only been like 6 months that I've been the head coach. Actually, it was the end of March, so yeah, about 6 months since I've been the head coach, and I've only really been working with Stipe in a trainer capacity since the early summer or the late spring when that fight started to congeal. So, I mean, it is what it is at that, in that regard, but it's been very interesting. He's an exceptional athlete. One of the kind of eye-opening moments for me, I have another black belt that I train with. He's probably my main training partner. His name is Jose. And Jose is excellent. Like, Jose is kind of one of my nightmare roles in the training room. He's not as good of a competitor as he is in training. So, like, if you look up Jose on the internet and watch his videos of competing, he's okay. But in the training room, he's an absolute fucking nightmare. Like, just an absolute nightmare. And Jose is also a little bit taller and lankier than me. So, ideal as a training partner for Stipe for this fight. And so we've been working on certain positions, certain situations, and I'm coaching Stipe on it, and I'm telling him, all right, this is your homework. This is what I want you to work on when I'm not here in order to prepare for the next training session with Jose. So he comes to the next training session with Jose, and afterwards Jose comes up to me, and he's like, man, he really got good in that position. Like, holy shit. And I'm like, maybe he took my advice. Maybe he did my homework. So I come up to Steve and I'm like, hey, so you did the homework? He goes, no, I didn't really have time for it. I go, so what the fuck? He goes, I just thought about it a bit. Like, that's the level of athlete we're talking about. He can think about it and become better at it. Doing it's a whole different, obviously doing it's important, but he's that good that he can put thought into something and just automatically be better at it.
That's really interesting. I've heard John Danaher talking about this in interviews that he's given, where he says that the mental aspect of training is more important than the physical aspect. And I feel like that's kind of what you're getting at.
Absolutely. But it was interesting to see it manifested at the level of, the heavyweight GOAT and my nightmare training partner. It's like watching it kind of play out in real time was fascinating.
That's crazy, man. I feel like that's what the higher level guys are doing a lot of times. And I mean, if you read the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, who's perhaps the greatest sword master of all time, one of the greatest samurai ever, he said that at the beginning of the book is that it's all about strategy, and that strategy is what is supreme. And it's almost like he was basically saying the same thing, but back in the Middle Ages. It's that at the end of the day, it's the mental aspect of things that is the best. And I found that a lot too. Maybe you have as well. A lot of times if I get beat by someone, they defeat me mentally before they tap me out physically. Like just yesterday, I was rolling with someone, and it was a tougher round. And I remember thinking like, man, he feels really tough. And it was just in that next moment that he got me in a front headlock. And, just little things like this, I've started to notice, like, even if I just give my opponent an inch mentally and I start to think like, oh shit, he's got a really good guillotine or whatever, then suddenly he's snatching that up. It's almost like I give myself that mental vulnerability. Is there anything like that you can attest to?
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. But, man, I wanted to ask you about this. I know that this is what we first connected about. And I feel like this is a nice segue because we're talking about preparing for a high-level match. The New York Times recently put out an article saying that jiu-jitsu and martial arts training is not safe and that there's a lot of injuries. But it says here, New York Times, injuries in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu prompt introspection in the growing martial art. And here we got a nice picture of Mr. Henner Gracie,
of course,
hanging out.
Yeah.
And it starts off with this person. Okay, I'm just going to read a little bit here. It says, when Eric Milsovic attended his first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, he hoped it would spark a mutual interest to share with his teenage daughter. Instead, he left the gym with a limp after injuring his left knee while sparring with an instructor and a distaste for one of the fastest growing martial arts for self-defense and competition. And then it goes on. But it's interesting because right away they get into talking about Joe Rogan, how we've got here Mark Zuckerberg, the Meta chief executive, started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a hobby during the coronavirus pandemic and recently competed in his first tournament. He has also jawed back and forth. I've never heard that before. Jawed, like instead of saying just talked. He's also jawed back and forth with Elon Musk about a cage match that appears to be more bluster than reality. I wonder how they came up with that because he seems actually pretty serious about taking a cage match with Elon. But man, they get into it a little bit more, talking about all the different ways that this guy got hurt. The instructor apparently applied a heel hook to him, and he spent the next 3 months limping and unable to run while working as a community relations officer with the police department. So
Yeah.
and he says here, it definitely hindered my mobility. So it looks like this guy went to a class, got heel hooked by the instructor, and now and then we get into hearing about Jack Greener, the $46.5 million injury that happened, that Henner Gracie was famously involved with. And of course, we get into that. That's the second thing that they bring up. So the first one is this anecdotal time where this dude gets heel hooked by an instructor. Then we get into the Greener case. And then we get into talking about Henner Gracie. Then we get into talking more about it generically. But in other words, we basically have those two different types of things that they're talking about. Get into Tom DeBlas talks a little bit here. But okay, so I just wanted to ask you, man, like, what's your reaction to this article? What's the first thing that you kind of pops into your head when you hear some of this information, you see this headline?
So the secret of jiu-jitsu is you have to do it right. You know, if you do jiu-jitsu correctly, and if you teach it correctly, then it's going to be just fine. But if you're a fucking asshole and you crank a heel hook on a day one white belt, that white belt's going to get hurt. If you're a fucking world champion and you're trying to do a fucking flip over someone, you might break their neck. I don't know. A crazy fucking idea, right? If you don't train like an like, guess what? If I go out in a soccer game and I go start fucking kicking people in the legs, they're gonna get hurt. You know, and therefore soccer's an injurious sport. You know, if I play any sport like an asshole, like if I'm playing baseball and I decide, you know what, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna hit the pitcher with a bat. That's what I'm gonna do. You know, the pitcher might get hurt. That's not the sport's fault. That's not, you know, it's not the rules' fault either, right? Like, no amount of no amount of regulation would prevent an instructor, especially, I don't know if it was a black belt instructor, but an instructor from blowing a fucking day one guy's knee out with a heel hook. Like, you know, I had an incident the other day in one of my classes. I have a blue belt. He's very boisterous, very talented, super nice guy. I don't have any problems with him, but he goes very hard on submissions. He just does for some reason. And I've talked to him about it a couple of times. So the other day we had another blue belt, taking his very first class with us. And right after the class, we had open mat. And my blue belt, the boisterous one, gets on a heel hook on this guy and goes and applies it. The other guy starts tapping. My guy doesn't feel it. And he hurts him. And, you know, I had a talk with both of them. Luckily, the guy that, you know, got hurt, it's not a serious injury. It was just a minor pop in his ankle. He's going to be fine. He was in training last night. But regardless, like, if you train like a jackass, you're going to hurt your partners. It doesn't matter what regulations are in place. It doesn't matter what rules are in place. When you're rolling with a beginner, if you go for any submission, be it a choke, an arm lock, a kimura, any submission whatsoever, you respect the fact that this person may not realize that they're in trouble. Like, they may not know. They may simply be unaware. So, like, for example, if I'm rolling with, even if I'm rolling with Stipe, for example, and I catch him in something, this is a guy who is preparing for a major professional event. Grappling is just one of the disciplines that he is trying to hone in on. And so I do not roll with him with the same intensity as, for example, I would when I go out and train with Dante Leone. It's different. It's a different kind of training because these guys are just preparing for grappling. They apply their submissions at a different level of intensity. With Stipe, if I just yank something, that's it. He might not get the fight. And so, why would I treat a day one white belt any differently? Like the problems that the New York Times illustrates are not jiu-jitsu problems. They're jackass problems. Like, these people are fucking jackasses. I don't know the instructors. I don't personally know Sinistro. I don't know who this Eastern Bloc gentleman who got hurt in training was rolling with. I don't know. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that in those moments, those instructors fucked up pretty big. And it has nothing to do with the sport of jiu-jitsu. In fact, I would argue that the sport of jiu-jitsu is significantly safer than soccer, which is mentioned in the article. It's kind of funny that the article mentions soccer in particular. There's a guy who comes and trains with us. He actually trains at a couple of different gyms, but I consider him kind of one of my students and one of my friends. He's a brown belt. He's very good. And this brown belt tore his ACL playing soccer. He's been doing jiu-jitsu for, God knows how long, getting heel hooks applied on him constantly in training, but soccer's what did him in. So I guess soccer's a super dangerous sport and kids shouldn't play it. Come on, New York Times, do better.
Well, look at football, for example. Football has so many concussions involved with it, but football is basically the America's sweetheart sport. You can't say anything bad about football, and you'll get all sorts of hate for sure.
That's it. That's my take on it.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you. I think that at the end of the day, it all goes to the instructor. It goes to where you're training at. I wanted to ask you about one more thing in the article. So we've got this part here where towards the end, they talk about how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu doesn't have the same governing body that other organizations like Judo have. And that is true. Judo has the IJF, which has pretty strict control over the judo community at an international level. And they do have a lot of different, safety mechanisms that they've applied that get kind of universally adopted. Then it goes on to talking about how that, we do have the IBJJF, but they don't really have, obviously that's just one organization. What the IBJJF doesn't affect ADCC or AGF or grappling industries or anything like that. And, we get into, I think there's even a Gracie Barra guy that they quote here. Yeah, he says, martial arts is the sport that really slipped through the net. Said this guy who owns a Gracie Barra gym in the UK. And this person, Allie, I guess it's a she said that they've got numerous safeguarding practices that she learned from a career spent in secondary education. And she said her coaches go through background checks and training for safety and first aid. Well, beginners are not taught submissions and are limited to groundwork for sparring so they don't get hurt from trips or throws. So in other words, they don't practice submissions on beginners and they don't do any sort of takedowns with beginners is what it sounds like. So here's what I'm getting at with this question, with this long preamble to the question is, do you think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu could use a governing body? Like, do you think that would be a good idea, or do you think that it should be left up to the instructor to basically come up with on their own out of their own curriculum? Like, what do you think is the best answer there?
All right, so I have a couple of different things, a couple of different observations, a couple of different answers for this. Number one, I'm going to make a prediction. Mystic Emil is going to make a prediction. sometime in the next couple of years, Gracie in Action or Gracie University or whatever is going to come out with their own federation. And they're going to be charging money for people to join said federation. And it's going to be a wonderful way for Henry Gracie to make money. So just prediction, I'm calling it. You know, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that's my prediction. We'll see, right? We'll see if it actually happens, but that's number one. Number two, we do have a governing body. It's called the IBJJF. Now, whether or not academies choose to be part of it is a different question. Whether or not the IBJJF exerts enough control or whatever, that's a different question. It exists. It is a governing body. I don't like them. I've been very vocal about the fact that I don't like the IBJJF, so don't get it twisted here. But it exists. Say what you want. It exists. Number two, all a governing body can do is give guidelines. Like I pointed to with the soccer example. We're playing a game of soccer, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start kneecapping people. I'm going to pull out a gun and start shooting people. Why not? It's fun. It's a good time. Of course, people are going to get hurt, right? Same deal in these jiu-jitsu academies. Both of the incidents that are described in the article were incidents of, at minimum, negligence. At minimum. At bare minimum, the instructor was negligent. Do I believe that Sinistro meant to paralyze Jack Greener? No. I don't believe that. I think he probably felt awful about it. I'm sure of it. I'm going to give him benefit of doubt. I don't believe that he, showed up to work that day thinking, I'm going to break this man's neck and change his whole fucking life. Do I think that the instructor in the other incident that blew the guy's knee out came to work that day thinking, I'm going to lose not one potential student, but two of them? Because this guy's daughter and him, right? So he lost money in that instance. Do I think he did that on? No, but they both fucked up big time. It just is what it is. Do I think my student showed up to training that day thinking I'm going to, scare the shit out of this brand new guy in training by cranking a heel hook and not letting go when he taps? No, I don't think he did that on purpose at all. I don't think he was mindful. And as an instructor, you have to be mindful of what's going on in the training room. You have to be mindful of when you're rolling with your students, right? Like some of my students, when I roll with brand new guys, if I feel like they're going to hurt me, like if I feel like I can't trust them, I put them in a position, I hold them there, and I tell them to try to escape. And then I let them escape, and I put them right back in there, and I let them try to escape again. Because I know that they're going to be safe. Like I said, I run two programs. One of them is at a judo academy. I've seen how dangerous judo can be and how seriously hurt judokas can get. I've seen that firsthand. I've also seen how annoyed judokas are with the IJF. So do we really want that in jiu-jitsu? Right? And then on top of that, in my two programs, I have one that is a much smaller program. So Strong Style, the gym where Stipe trains, the bigger gym where I teach, has around 3,000 members. The other gym, I might have 30 members, maybe 40 total, right? So each class, maybe 10, 15 people tops. So I cherry pick training partners for my students at the smaller program. They are given their partners. They are told who to train with. And so day one white belts, brand new white belts, don't touch each other for the first 6 months. They only are training with blue belts and higher. And generally speaking, it's only specific blue belts that I let train with them. Because that way they're safer. Right? I'm not going to be a Gracie Baja where I prevent people from rolling for their first 6 months. That's asinine. But once the person understands what tapping means and, how to tap, and they kind of have a basic idea, they get kind of a crash course, they're thrown right into it. Now, the other program, 3,000 members, I'm not fucking cherry picking people. I'm sorry. What I'm doing is this. I have a beginner's class. And in that beginner's class, we don't roll. Usually it takes a couple of months for people to kind of graduate the beginner's class. They're still allowed to attend it, but then they're allowed to kind of mix in with the other people. And that way they felt submissions, they felt different positions. It's not ideal. I'd love to be able to kind of do what I do at the other place, but that's how I do it. I would fucking hate if somebody else came in and told me how to run my program and told me, oh, you can't let these white belts roll, but he's rolling with a fucking black belt who will not hurt him. Like, this black belt is like rolling with a lead blanket, you know? Like, this guy over here, this purple belt I got him rolling with, he's one of the gentlest, people I have here. He's not going to hurt this new white belt. Don't tell me how to run my program.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think that it should be left up to the individual school, but I think that it's very important that people do the research on their academy and also ask the instructor about it. Like, let's say there's someone listening to this and they're brand new to jiu-jitsu. Like, talk to your instructors, talk to your coaches and ask them about this. And if it's a good academy, they should be talking about it regularly. Like, they should be, before it's time to roll, the instructor should be telling them what pace to go at. They should be telling them, here's the intensity of the training that we're looking for. And something that I've found works really well, at least in the training room here, I'd love to hear some recommendations from you too, because I've got the Jiu-Jitsu Outlet Academy here that we've been open about 3 months, and we got a lot of beginners. And something that's worked really well here is just having one person on defense and one person on offense works really well. Instead of allowing them both to go hard at each other, just saying, hey, we're going to go for, 1 minute here, and you're on offense, you're on defense, and then we're going to switch. And that way you have them not necessarily trying to kill each other. One person is trying to kill, the other person is just trying to survive. And that I found, it reduces the injury rate so much, so very much, because then you're not getting into this sort of thing.
Yes, structured training and situational training are a great way to allow people to start to understand how to train. I agree 100%.
Yeah, we just had Kit Dale on the podcast a little while ago, and he was talking about how he uses games. He doesn't do a whole lot of drilling. He does pretty much games only, and teaching the whole art basically just through different situational positions and stuff like that. So I'd love to hear from you, man. What are some of the things that have worked really well for you in the training room, both to basically help people learn better, but also to increase safety? What are some of the things you think about as an instructor?
Yeah, I think situational training, I think Kit Dale really has the right idea with that.
Yeah, I think people are calling it now like ecological training or something like that.
The ecological method, yeah. I don't know. I don't know where that term came from. One of my students is a big fan of it, and he's currently convalescing an ACL tear, which he actually inflicted on himself doing judo, I think. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But he reached out to Greg Souders and plans on helping me implement a lot of those strategies and training tactics.
I love it, man. Well, you'll have to let us know how that works and any tips that you come up with, man, because I think this is the really important.
I've been doing kind of my own version of it for the past couple of years, and what I've noticed is that from day one white belt to year one white belt, I can take people to an average purple belt level if they listen to what I'm telling them. Like, I've got guys that have been training with me for a year that are not exceptional athletes, that, just kind of average Joe guys who are now an absolute handful for anybody that they train with. And they've not been training for very long, and they have no other athletic background, no, wrestling or something. These guys have just been doing jiu-jitsu with me, and that's, by doing that sort of training and by kind of getting them in the mindset of, you are not trying to beat your training partner. You're trying to beat the individual position. You're trying to win the individual games, and like showing them those games and then doing it like that has really skyrocketed the ability in the training room.
What are some of your favorite games that you play? Like, could you give us an example of one that's been working, that's been popular with the class?
So when we do our warm-ups, I still show technique. I do a lot of technique showing, because again, I've only been doing the one program for 6 months, and a lot of people came in with bad habits. I'm trying to fix some of those bad habits. I'm trying to um, really kind of expand upon things, make people better. Um, so there's a couple of things I'll do. Like I'll start them in a guard, whatever that guard might be, and then have the top person try to pass, bottom person try to sweep. Just as an example. Yesterday I'm drawing a blank on the name of the IG account that I saw this on, but it was the guy was kind of analyzing some of Gordon Ryan's words, and then he was talking about some games that people can play to do better. And it was you start out in a ashi or single leg X, and then one person's trying to stand up, the other person's trying to keep that person down. That's it. Like all you're doing is just you can change your leg positioning. If it's gi, you don't have to reap, but whatever. You can change your leg positioning, but you want to keep their butt on the floor. If they're able to stand up, then you lose and reset.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff, man. It's so much more engaging.
And like one of the things that's kind of been a constant. I learned a drill. Do you know who Emilio Hernandez is?
No, I don't think so.
So he's best known. He beat Gianni Grippo at No-Gi Pans in, I want to say 2019. Wound up taking second place to one of the Meow brothers. So he's one of those lighter, very, very high level guys. And he came out here a couple of years ago and taught a seminar. And I went to the seminar, and the way he warmed up the seminar was with this pummeling drill. It's kind of hard to describe, but basically you're pummeling your legs in and out of your partner's legs. Your partner just kind of sits static. So I had my students doing that for a while, and I also had them doing a drill where they're trying to retain their guard without any frames, just kind of using their feet on the other person. So the other person's trying to walk around their guard, and they're trying to retain their guard with their feet. So that's morphed into what I call the hybrid drill, where what we're doing is the top person is trying to use their lower body to pass, while the bottom person uses their lower body to retain their guard.
That's really neat, man. Yeah, that's something that we do a lot here too. I got it from Ethan Krellinson's seminar, because I went to a seminar with him once, and he had us warm up with a similar sort of drill where he was having us pass, but without using our hands. But you could have your hands on the mat,
Right.
and it was like a way to work on your leg pummeling, basically, where you're allowed to have your hands on the mat, so you could do a tripod pass, but you can't put the hands on the person, if that makes sense. And
right,
yeah, it works really well, man.
It's a great way to learn how to pass. It's also a great way to learn how to enter legs. And so I've been using it for both.
That's awesome. So I feel like going back to the article that we were reacting to and reading, I feel like this way of training is a lot better in terms of both teaching jiu-jitsu, but also increasing safety in the training room and ultimately making jiu-jitsu more accessible to people. It's making it so that the game nature, it introduces them to rolling and kind of what it might feel like a little bit earlier, even, because if you can play a game or you can do one of these drills on your first day, but it might put you in a case where you're going to get injured if you roll with someone and go 100% on your first day. So I feel like what we're talking about here, it's a way to almost bridge that gap. You can get your beginner classes rolling and training hard a little bit sooner without that same risk of injury, man. I feel like that's a big takeaway I had from this conversation.
But the big thing though is that like there still has to be common sense. There still has to be, for example, I've got an assistant instructor helping me run the program at Strong Style. His name is Jamie, and Jamie was telling me yesterday about like one of his students asks questions that indicate that he doesn't have any common sense, and he's legitimately worried about this guy. Like they were doing some situational sparring. The guy hit his partner in the eye and then went super hard after that, because like he saw that as an opportunity, and it's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like their common sense is not common, apparently. And that's, I think, what we see with the Jack Greener case and this other guy mentioned in the article. The instructors were not employing common sense in those situations.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's important when you're an instructor to really to be technical and to be slow. You know what I mean? Like you shouldn't be the one in the training room going for some technique that has to be done fast with speed, if that makes sense. I mean, that's cool, and there's a time and place for that. But ultimately, if you're rolling with a bunch of people who are, I mean, if you're the instructor, you should be probably one of the higher level people in the room, if not the highest level of technical ability, right? So you should be able to go at a safer, slower pace, right? Like you shouldn't need to go hard with a day one white belt if you're the instructor. You should be able to be smooth and technical and keep them safe, really, at the end of the day.
Absolutely. No, and when I'm rolling with guys that are brand new, like I said, if I feel like I can't trust you, my goal is to very slowly smother you. If I feel like I can trust you, I'm just going to feel what you do in different positions and then get out of that position and put myself in a different position. Then get out of that position, put myself in a different position. And then when I see exploits, I'm going to tell them. That's it. I'm not here to beat you. I'm not here to win. I'm here to teach you. I'm here to make this a thing that you want to do. And I have students, you know, my most active competitor is a 54-year-old woman. She is my most active competitor. And, you know,
that is awesome.
I have to make training safe for her and enjoyable for her. And I have to make training safe and enjoyable for the heavyweight goat. I have to make training safe and effective for, you know, a 100-pound person and for a 300-pound person. And people have to learn how to train with each other. And it's harder to do at the bigger gym because there's less one-on-one attention. But the way that I've structured my program, if you're following my rules, you're going to be safe.
What would you say are those rules? Just so we have them clearly, because I feel like you're dropping some gold here, man.
Tap early, tap often. Tap verbally. Let go when the other person taps. And match the other person's energy. Always match energy. If the other person's going hard, go hard. If they're not going hard, don't go hard. And be very fucking careful when you're standing up and when you go from standing up to the floor. Because that's where the majority of injuries are happening from what I've seen.
What do you feel are some of the ways that people can practice takedowns a little safely? Like, is there a way to do that where you're gonna reduce that likelihood of injury?
Drilling the takedowns, like, you know, passive resistance, but still some degree of resistance, and kind of drilling them and kind of feeling the different positions. I think drilling is necessary for things that are dangerous, like takedowns, because unlike sweeps or unlike arm bars or whatever, you can't do them, in my opinion, as well in that ecological method. Maybe somebody else out there disagrees with me and is going to prove me wrong, but in my experience, drilling is a major factor. And then we were doing a thing when Dante was training for ADCC. We were going down, and it was actually Mark Coleman was running the practice, which is kind of crazy. Former UFC heavyweight champion, or the first UFC heavyweight champion. And what we were doing was what they call it scrimmage wrestling, where it's like a combination of wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and it's intense, but it feels a bit safer, if that makes any sense. Like you're kind of working through the different positions and working through the different parts of the takedowns, and you're not going absolutely ham all the time.
Yeah,
it's tough. Training takedowns. Yeah, training takedowns is tough.
Yeah,
I don't.
It is.
I tell my students, if you're above 30, train takedowns at your own risk.
Yeah.
I hate to say it like that, but like if you haven't wrestled before, learning wrestling after 30 is not easy. It's possible. I've seen it done, but it's not easy.
Yeah. I've picked it up here after getting past 30, and I did judo in college for sure, but I just started wrestling a little more seriously.
That's takedowns. That's the same. It's the same
Yeah,
thing. Judo and wrestling.
they're the same.
Judo is a wrestling. Judo is a wrestling.
Yeah,
art.
I totally agree. But no, but I'm totally with you, man. Like it's a lot of falls. I think mastering the break fall is very important. Not enough jiu-jitsu schools teach the break fall. I think that's something that they could steal from judo is more time spent with the what they call in judo the ukemi, the falling techniques. Super important. But Emil, I know we've talked for a while here, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. But before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you want to say? And where can people find you if they want to come train with you and hear more about what you're working on?
So, I mean, my Instagram's Emil Fischer BJJ. My Facebook's also the same thing. I got a Facebook athlete page. I post a lot of instructional content, some comedy shit, some competition footage. I train and teach out of Strong Style MMA, and then also I run my own program, Effective Jiu-Jitsu, which is run out of Ararat Martial Arts here in Warrensville Heights, Ohio. Other than that, as far as what I have to tell people, stop being shitty. Stop being shitty to each other. I've seen Jiu-Jitsu kind of go in a weird way the last few years, especially with we've had the situation with the fight sports thing, and now people are just being cool about it. It's like, really, guys? Call out bullshit when you see it. Stand up. This is a sport that we have kids in, and kids are seeing some pretty awful examples. But I don't know. I try not to be too preachy, but that's something I kind of set a hard line about.
No, I'm with you, man. I feel like some ways of the jiu-jitsu, especially at the higher levels, seems to be going in the same direction as the UFC in terms of just like who can talk more crap on each other. And I'm just not interested in it, honestly. Like it doesn't do anything. No, it's not enticing to me. I don't care who said what about who. I just really care about who's better at martial arts. I like watching cool jiu-jitsu. And I like respect. Yeah. I like good sportsmanship. For me, good sportsmanship is cool. Like I wish that was more the message. Like it's cool to respect your opponent. That's what cool looks like. It's not cool to talk crap about people because who cares at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, I can see some benefit to the trash talk. I feel like it has in some ways increased interest in the sport, but I'd say more like the way people treat each other in the gym, the way people treat the sport. It's kind of in a weird place right now, I think, because it's starting to grow. It's interesting to see that expansion of the sport, but there's some weird shit going on sometimes.
Yeah, there is, man, for real. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I feel like the biggest thing that I've taken away from you, man, in this conversation is like just have that common sense. Common sense can really help avoid a lot of these issues. If you're an instructor, it's probably not a great idea to go hard with a day one white belt and heel hook him. Yeah. Not a great idea. Good way to end up in the New York Times, apparently.
Apparently, man. A good way to fucking put jiu-jitsu in the New York Times. And if you're an instructor and one of your students rapes somebody, don't let that student come back into the gym.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
Really fucking complicated idea, right?
Crazy.
One of your students rapes somebody, they shouldn't be in the gym the next day.
Yeah. Crazy. Man. Well, Emil, thank you so much for coming on the show. And hey, if you're listening to this and you want to follow Emil, go check out the links down below and give him a follow. I appreciate you, bro.
Have a good day.
Thank you.